Hey there, Dango Stu here. In today's video I'm going to go about setting up my boat, the Green Machine, for fishing. Before we get started, I've got another picture though. This one's Harry Goetcher, I think it's pronounced, from Mould in Wales. So it's Harry and Kat doing a bit of marine mechanics there in the picture. Nice forward controls. Now before I start adding stuff to the boat, I'll show you where we're at now. Some of the things I'd like to change and some of the things that unfortunately I can't change. The first thing I'll show you that's not really relevant to setting up for fishing is, you'll have seen in the previous video I was sort of umming and ahhing about where to put this grill. I ended up bringing it forward, so these bolts now hold the grill in, and it has the advantage of hiding the bolts from this as well, so I think that was the best option in the end. I've also put some Sikaflex along the base here, so that if water comes on the deck, unless it's a big wave, it'll run along the deck and run down. The main reason I did that is to keep this dry, but what happened was I'd been keeping these life jackets here underneath, and we had a really big rainstorm one night, and when I came in the morning, that one had set itself off and was wedged in here, so I had to pull it out. So obviously too much water was getting in there. I do believe what actually happened was that it probably sat in a way where water could go through the join and actually collect inside here. I don't think it would have been water running off. So I'm thinking maybe it was hanging out a bit like this and that water was actually filling up inside the casing. What that means is I'm going to need to rig up some sort of, I'm thinking like an elasticated netting, something that just stops things coming out. The wind blows them out, and when the boat tilts they come out. So I definitely need some way of securing things inside as well. Anyway, that's an aside, bit of a update on a previous project. Now the other main disadvantage of this boat is it's not really designed for fishing from the ground up. The hull probably was originally, but the modifications I've made have really sort of separated the hull into distinct sections, which isn't ideal. The front here is obviously just set up for driving, a reasonably comfortable place to be given it's predominantly a commuter boat. Bit of a storage box, and then a back section. So the back section is where I'm going to focus on putting the fishing gear. So originally at the back here I had the battery strapped to the floor here, right at the back, up against the back seat, and the fuel tank in a very similar position. My plan now is to try and move all that under this storage box so that there's at least one flat area that you can stand and cast from. The area between this back seat and the transom's reasonably underutilised, and there's a bit of space here. I didn't put the battery here because I wanted to try and shift some weight forward so the boat didn't end up bow up all the time. But there's a fair bit of space over the other side under the water separating fuel filter as well. So step one, move all this stuff and get some clear space back. I'm going to start by unscrewing this battery strap because I really do want to reuse it. This battery really just shifts around all over the shop if it isn't strapped down, particularly in rough weather. And the last thing I want to do is have it bouncing around and putting strain on the leads going to it. The fuel tank I'm not going to strap down because I want to be able to easily pull it out to fill it up whenever I need to. But I will look at putting some sort of a timber block that just stops it sliding, something I can kind of wedge it against, even though I can pull it out sideways or something along those lines. Before I do any of this though, that floor at the moment is just floating in there, and it does tend to migrate its way sort of port and starboard. It doesn't slide up and down so much because it's locked onto the ribs, but it can rock and roll on those ribs. So I'm going to find some stainless screws that are just long enough to go through the floor into the ribs, but not through the ribs through the hull, for obvious reasons. So I'll pull the battery off, pull the fuel tank out, position it, and then lock that down first. I'm going to use some of these stainless sort of bugle head screws to drill this through, and hopefully you can see this. I've chosen a drill bit that's pretty much the diameter of the shaft of the screw, but just leaves the threads visible. So it gives me enough material to bite into. Got these holes drilled for the screws now. I didn't have to worry too much about the length of the drill bit because you can very clearly feel when it touches aluminium and then when it's gone through the top layer of the rib. So there's no risk that you're going to drill down through the hull. So that's the end product. A nice sort of barefoot friendly fastener just below the surface of it. I could put a bit of sealant on here too if I want to really smooth it off and protect this plywood from rotting, but I'm pretty happy with that. I've put 4 screws, so 2 each side. I think that's more than enough to hold the floor down. Fortunately, I've got enough length on these battery leads to come along under the seat and then come up here with the battery under the box. So I'll re-drill this strap, put the strap back on, and then we're done with the battery. So now, underneath the box, got the battery strapped up, wires coming under the side, and a paddle here just attached to the seat using these sort of pipe clamps, clips, whatever they're called. So that gives quite a comfortable space to sit here now, have your feet not tripping over anything. It's also enough space for one person to stand and cast. I know it's not ideal, it's not like having a completely open flat bottom boat with the interior, but I think the critical thing is having some flat space that is clear of clutter, and this is pretty much the best I can do at this stage to make some space in this boat. All right, I'll get that fuel tank under there too. I'll just put a strip of wood underneath to block it, stop it sliding out, and then we'll get on to the more interesting stuff. So there we go, certainly a much clearer space than it was before. That's about the best I can do for making space. I know it's not a lot, but I think every little bit counts. Next thing I do is add a few things that I bought off eBay. None of it was particularly expensive. The first thing I got here is a set of rod holders for fishing. And the second set is a vertical set for storing rods. So I'll take them over to the boat and I'm just going to have a bit of a think about where best to put them, and then I'll start thinking about how to attach them. Now these rod holders for fishing came with 2 styles of attachment. There's a flat flange like this with 4 screws, and this style that's designed to go around a round post. I've only really got the round post at the front, the windscreen bar, grab rail, so I think I will put one at the front using this. The nice thing is they're really easy to drop in and out, so when I'm not using them, I'll just have the brackets. They hopefully won't get caught on wharves and that kind of thing during general use of the boat. And then I can just pull these out quickly when we go fishing. The gunnels on this boat are quite narrow, so I don't really have the option to put them on the gunnels. I do have a bit of space here on the quarter, but if I then put a rod in, the handle sort of hits this diagonal brace, which isn't ideal either. On the port side of the boat, I've got the stern light, and it's actually mounted to a bit of aluminium plate mounted onto here across this whole surface. So I think I'm going to replicate that, which lets me have the rod holder further back and then have the handle coming down like that. As a happy coincidence, that'll also just reinforce the corner of the boat, so that's a good thing too. This little square of aluminium here is 220 mils long, which is pretty much long enough to do what I want to do. So I'm just going to cut this off, lay it on, then I'll cut the diagonal in the boat. I think I'll go about here. I've got some concerns about the steering cable being able to pull that out when I need to. To get the angle, all I'm going to do is come in as far as I can until this edge is flush here, this point's here. I'll mark that point. Now we've got the right angle, I'll cut this off and then I'll sort of just position this. My plan is to position it somewhere so that it's in a little bit from both edges, but has enough of an overlap to get some strong rivets in. So I'm thinking about here. I've done this cut, I've also just put it on a wire wheel to deburr it, because once again, you're on a boat, bare feet, wet hands, you don't want any sharp edges. I think what I'm going to do also is just put a bead of Sikaflex under here just to stop it vibrating for whatever reason. I don't think it will, but I don't think it's going to hurt either. I say Sikaflex, but this is actually just a generic brand. They're essentially just polyurethane sealants. These rivets have aluminium shanks and mandrels and things, so they won't rust at all. Now I've got this plate riveted on, I'm going to mount this rod holder quite a way back on it, and that's for a couple of reasons. If I come forward, I'm only going to have that same problem with the handle. The rod's going to hit here. I want it to come over. But the other reason is I want to put the bolts that hold this bracket on through this plate and through the diagonal brace at the back, and then it'll just be into this plate. Otherwise, all the force would be taken by these 4 rivets. But if I go that way, it'll be 2 bolts at the back, 2 rivets, and 2 rivets at the front, holding this rod holder on. Now I do have some rivets with quite long heads on them, more than long enough to go through that and then through thin aluminium. So I'm going to rivet this base on as well. All right, drop this in. It's got good clearance now. Happy with that. As subscribers will know, I'm not the most experienced fisherman in the world, but so far I do enjoy lure fishing more than bait fishing. So I can't see myself spending a lot of time sitting around with bait on a hook and leaving a rod in a holder. But I do like the idea of having this one at the stern for just trolling in the boat. I also think it's good just to have somewhere safe to put a rod down while you go and, you know, re-rig a line or do whatever you're doing. So I think I'm going to stick with just one at the back, and then I'm going to put another one at the front, but this time I'm going to use the bar holder, so I'll show you that. All right, here's problem number 1. These are actually designed to go around a slightly smaller diameter bar. So now I'm just going to see whether I can use some longer bolts. No. Looks like I'm actually going to have to drill notches in the pole in order for the bolts to sneak past it. A little bit unfortunate, but is what it is. Here I've marked the levels where the bolts come through, so I'm going to use an angle grinder to cut some channels. These ones are actually sort of a hex bolt head. I believe these are the same thread, so I'm going to use the supplied nylocks. So that took a bit longer than I was hoping, and now can't be slid up and down obviously, so that's the downside. But I'm pretty happy with that position. The nice thing is, when the boat's underway, I can take this out, I can take the holder out, and it's not really in the way at all. So here's the bait board I bought. Pretty standard budget sort of model. I didn't have a lot of money to spend on it, but it's got essentially a little knife holder here, drop it through, drain holes, a lip here, and a little bit of a measure across here up to 40 centimetres. Now it comes with hardware and 2 main suggested ways of installing it. One is on a round bar using this channel. So the channel sits over the round bar and then you bolt through. The other is to come up through a rowlock holder. And that's the way I think I'm going to go. So let's have a go. I'll do a test fit on these rowlocks, see if it fits all right, and then we'll go from there. What I do like about this as well is it's got these little edges here. And these edges are designed to go up hard against the outside of the gunnel. Then you've got this nylon washer that's serrated. The lip here is serrated as well. So once you've got your position, those serrations lock into each other. And then you come up through and then put a pretty simple wing nut on it. It really is that straightforward. The main thing I like about this is it's really easy to remove. I don't want it permanent, and I do want it outside the boat. Obviously, then, you know, any sort of fluids, fish guts, whatever can drain out. You can also use them as a burley board and just consciously let stuff run out. But in a boat with this little room, gaining this extra space outside the gunnels, I reckon's gold. So I really like this design. I'm sure there are a million that work this way, but it was cheap. As you just saw, very easy to mount. I hadn't even looked at that yet, so it really was just put one bolt through, a couple of nylon spacers and a wing nut. It'll be nice and easy to take off and just put back in the storage box when I'm not fishing. So that's pretty much done. The other thing I like, once again, happy coincidence, is where the rowlock is. It's quite accessible should you be sitting on the bench here. It's not like it's sort of up here in a space where it's awkwardly in the way of the storage box. You can be sitting here, have a rod in this holder and still reach this board, so I think that'll work really well. The last thing I want to install now is this set of vertical rod holders for holding rods when you're sort of underway on your way to a site.
Before I started making this holder, I changed the battery in the microphone so it wouldn't go flat, and then forgot to turn it on again. So sorry about that. All I really do here is find a piece of polyboard which is nice and strong. It's also completely rot proof, so it's good for making the backing for this. And then just figure out the correct length to make it so that the rod sits nicely in it. Not just this rod, but obviously a bit of a range of rods I might buy in the future. Then I just screw it onto the seat at the back of the boat using some stainless screws.
So here's the finished product with the vertical rod holder. It's occurred to me that I had the microphone off for the last hour. By now you'll know that because you'll have seen me narrating putting this together, but I'll just quickly run you through it. So I decided to put it centrally because I thought if there were two people sitting either side of the boat, then it was good that it wasn't in anyone's way. It also means that you can sort of be sitting here, have the bait board here, have the rods here, and then still have access to the storage box here, as well as this rod holder. So you've got pretty good access to all things sort of from this one position. So I'm pretty happy with that. So I've got both these stoppers on now. They're pretty secure just with a single rivet. I don't anticipate any problems with that. And because they're cut down, this lid comes down to be a pretty level bench now. So this actually works out really well, particularly if you're sitting on this starboard side of the boat. You've got a level bench with a lip so nothing can roll off it. You've got your bait board right here, rod here, or selection of rods here, a rod holder here. It's slightly awkward. I guess the one part of this that's slightly awkward is you do face inside. So you're either going to find yourself casting to the opposite side of the boat, in which case, you know, the tip of the rod's still going to be past the gunwale because it's not that wide a boat, or you're going to be sort of sitting a little bit sideways. Once this straps off and the boat's not on the trailer, you can actually sit here as well, and that's actually not a bad arrangement either. I could even think about moving the bait board to the other side, so you use that when you need to, and then you come back here and have clear access over the side here. Anyway, that's the arrangement so far. So what I'm going to do now is just finish cleaning up here, and then we'll go and launch the boat. And just to round things out, I'll take you through the things that I keep in my tackle box. Subscribers will know I'm not a particularly experienced fisherman, but I guess the things I've chosen to put in there are the things that I consider that, from what I've learned so far, are kind of essential, just the essential basics for a beginner to have. So we'll get out in the water and then we'll go through that. Well, here we are. As happy as I am with this new setup, it's turned out to be a bit of a rubbish afternoon, unfortunately, but I found a little section under the cliffs of Wabi that's pretty much out of the wind, so that's all right. I guess time will tell how well this setup works, but I imagine I'll spend quite a bit of time in this corner of the boat. With that strap gone, now the boat's off the trailer, you can sit quite comfortably here. Maybe if I'd thought about using this seat more, I would have actually moved the rods over and sort of favoured one side of the boat. But to be honest with you, it's not a huge issue. Having all the rods really accessible, I think it's going to be really good. And even if you are facing this way, you know, casting across the boat, you've still got the rod well past it. Sorry, that tripod really doesn't like this swell. One thing I didn't really make a holder for, like I had with that paddle and a boat hook on the other side, is a landing net. I can kind of see how it's the sort of thing you'd want to get to pretty quickly. I mean, it can sit in the storage box on the top like that. It's not in the way. You can reach it from the seat. I think I'll run with that for now. But I can see how it's something you really do want on hand should you catch something too big to lift in the boat on the line. The other obvious thing that's missing is just some sort of space for an esky or a chilibin, depending on which part of the world you're from. I'm thinking, I don't really know. There's room on the floor here if there's only one of you, but if there was two people here, I think it would get crowded. And I did want to put some sort of live tank in the back. So I'll have a think about that. In the meantime, though, I really just need to concentrate on moving this boat before we hit those rocks. Hang on. No, bad time for that. All right, enough of that. Let's just finish up by going through the tackle box quickly. So I guess I made a conscious decision not to go too nuts with gear. A, I don't have the budget, and B, I just like the idea of sort of, you know, travel light. I can see how if you're really passionate about your fishing, there's so many different situations you might be fishing in, so many different species you might be going for that you do start to need it. But this is what I decided to start with, particularly for fishing in the Hawkesbury. So this particular bag came with two compartmentalised boxes in it, but they were both this size exactly. But I originally already had just a little one I used as my sole fishing gear. So I'll sort of start with this one. All I really keep in it is the real basics essentially of bait fishing. Just some swivels, some hooks that I think are sort of roughly the right size. I'm a bit rubbish, I know, I can't even tell you what size they are. I know they've all got numbers, but yay size for sort of brim, flathead, that kind of thing. And then some weights, and I can't even tell you how much they weigh. That's how bad I am at fishing. Anyway, I also then just had this little stone for sharpening the knife, and I found that was handy just to wrap this rig around, which is simply a hook, a leader and a swivel. So if ever I'm swapping that rod from a lure to bait fishing again, I can simply just attach the swivel and have that sort of rigged up, ready to go. So that's all I kept in that little one. And honestly, if you're looking at just getting into fishing, then it's all you need to go and do a bit of bait fishing. This box is the one I keep lures in. Once again, I didn't really go too nuts with lures, although there's a million and one. I got these ones, which is the one that's actually on the rod at the moment, which I believe are 20 gram soft vibes. So they're a soft plastic lure, 2 treble hooks on them, and I found them quite good for flathead so far here. I got those online. I got them as 10 for $40, so they're essentially $4 each, so they were pretty cheap, and so far they've actually been pretty good. These are sort of a metal, I guess a larger version of these sorts of metal twisties, I think they're called. These are more for from what I understand, more for sort of surface fish. I have in the past caught Australian salmon on these. So I've got those, and once again, they came as a pack of 8 for, I think it was 8 for $8 delivered or something. They were really cheap, so I thought I'll grab those. This is a hard body plastic, which as you crank it, it kind of dives, which is quite good for brim and things around structure. So I'm going to have a go with that. I haven't even used that one yet. And then that one's a squid jig for catching squid. So that's all I've got so far, but I think it kind of covers the range of things that I'm likely to go fishing for on the Hawkesbury at the moment. Other than that, literally all I keep is another knife, a little hook remover thing, some pliers for getting hooks out, and some line. So I've got a couple of rolls of braid, so that's some 15-pound braid and some 10-pound braid. And then I've got one 20-pound leader, roll of 20-pound leader. And that literally is it. That's all I've got at the moment. But it's certainly been enough to do all the fishing I've wanted to do. Quickly show you this. This is a Shimano Curado. I think it was a 70E or something. And this rod is a really old rod that belonged to my wife's father. And when he passed away, we were sort of cleaning out the house and I found it. And I thought it was really cool. It's called a spin caster or something. So that's the rod I've been using that was his, which I think is really nice just to get it back in action. And the Shimano reel's been really good. I'm really happy with that one. So as I said, you know, I'm really having fun getting into fishing. It's definitely new for me. I'm much more of a mechanic sort of type. I mean, I've always loved boating, but I've always been a bit more into diving, scuba diving, than fishing. So, you know, I'm kind of looking forward to this summer and getting out there and learning more about it. So I hope this video helps you if you've got a small boat that you're sort of looking at some ideas perhaps for how to set it up for fishing. I got a lot of the ideas for this boat from a guy called Chris Pat, who's staying on the island from Germany at the moment, and really kindly took me out fishing a few times and gave me a few tips on fishing and just having a look at how he set up his boat that was smaller than this, although an open boat, so it was probably in some ways more suited to being a fishing boat. But a really nice guy. He goes back to Germany in a few weeks, unfortunately, so we'll miss him. But I'm hoping he starts a fishing channel on YouTube so I can keep learning from him. All right, well, that's all. Take care. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time. See ya.